Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing super well. My name is Wintana Melekin. I am a customer solutions manager here at NView by Civic Eagle. And just to tell you a little bit about what Civic Eagle is a company that has produced what I would say is the most impressive policy tracking platform around. NView has the ability to create and support tech savvy teams who are doing the work to track policy in every single state, DC, Puerto Rico, and federally. We also give you the ability to be able to communicate with your entire team and help you become as effective, responsible, and responsive to public policy. We help you track, analyze, and collaborate on policy in ways that no other tool can. But today we're here with someone who is oh so brilliant, and I'm so excited to introduce them. Our amazing guest, Ashley Robinson, the Deputy State Director of America Votes GA, also the principal of the Blue Institute, also, listed in Stacey Abrams' book. I always have to tell people that. I definitely had a fangirl moment about that. And just want to give you a couple minutes to introduce yourselves and tell us about you, and then we'll jump into the program.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Wintana. Thanks so much to the Civic Eagle team for having me. Guys, I can't tell you how Civic Eagle and InView has saved the life of a number of organizations that I work with. And as the Deputy State Director, shout out to our State Director, Leslie Small, and the rest of our America Votes Georgia team. But we work with about 60 plus organizations and help support their legislative advocacy as well as their electoral work. And so, as you can imagine, everything that Georgia has been through in the past year and a half, right? Kind of where we are right now, really would not have been possible without us being able to kind of maintain wins, or at least Stacey likes to say lose well, but I'll just say that we work very hard at the state capitol to maintain as many wins as we can, whether they're small or large. Through being able to track legislation in real time, being able to share that information with one another and across teams. And so we do that with a number of groups who are who work in the legislative capacity as well as the electoral capacity at the state capitol year round here in Georgia. I also am founder and principal of Blue Institute, and that is we're a PAC, we're 527, and we train young people of color to help pipeline them into a number of progressive spaces, whether you're looking to move into campaigns or you're looking to move into organizations or even into entities that are or institutions that are more governmental, and maybe you're interested in lobbying, maybe you're interested in doing something at the state capitol. There are spaces for young people, particularly of color. And when Tana mentioned me being in the book, I was Stacey Abrams' former chief of staff during her time as a House Minority Leader here in Georgia. So I started really young and had an opportunity to be able to work not only under the brightest mind, I believe, that is in Democratic politics right now, or in politics in general, but to be able to see the value in being able to be a young person in politics and to learn and to grow. And really that's where that was birthed from my own experiences, and from I didn't see a lot of folks that look like me. And so I think it's important for me to be able to reach back, bring folks with me as I'm continuing to kind of chart a path throughout the political space that we are all a part of.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, I definitely fangirled over that book. The minute I was my first Zoom with you, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to tell her. I could not tell our
I
folks
appreciate it.
yes.
I never had a fan. It was such a surreal moment for me because I know that she wrote it and I know that all of those things happened, but to have someone actually like reference it is different. So I appreciate that one time.
I'll never forget that moment. I was like, whoa, this person's right in front of me. So it's just such an honor to have you live on this conversation. And let me just say to the folks that are watching the chat from home, I would love for this chat box to be a space where folks can be communal, ask questions, give feedback. So if you could just drop your name or your organization or what type of work you're doing, and just let the folks know in the chat, what you're up to, so that we can have a conversation going. I've got a teammate who is actually, reading all these messages, feeding them to us. So please do communicate with us. And then jumping into our program. So it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. We want to talk about how do we live our values, not only in the nonprofit sector, not only in the electoral sector, but also in the business sector. Civic Eagle is a company. We do have, concerns and ideas and visions around profit, but also that doesn't mean we're not responsible. We are a mission-based organization that's all about making democracy more accessible. And so we want to talk about how companies can do that. And so today's topic is about customers are increasingly expecting corporations and organizations to act with social interests at their heart. And we want our companies to care about voting rights, to climate, to housing. We also know that our, public policy departments and companies can be really small and don't have a lot of opportunity to participate in these conversations around equity and justice. And so we want to talk about how can you do that effectively without, I like to say woke washing, watering it down or doing something just transactional. And so we're going to talk about how it can be difficult, but also how to do it right. And so really excited to jump into that conversation and hear about it. First, I'm going to jump into the first question and just say, what are some examples of people doing it right? Are there times where you've seen someone really just be an all-star at this activity? And what are some examples of folks standing up on social justice issues? And I feel like you've got a Rolodex of it. No one has held corporations accountable like Georgia. So I'd love
right. I know, right? I think it's interesting to see that companies and corporations stand at, I think, a really pivotal intersection between social responsibility and also just meeting their bottom line, right? And so sometimes the bottom line can seem like a very conservative construct in theory. And sure, I think in most cases it is, right? I mean, the ultimate goal is to make money, but you're making money with the folks who are going to be purchasing your product and utilizing your services. And so you've got to be able to meet folks in the middle. And when we were working primarily on the voting rights legislation, SB 202, we had to have a lot of hard conversations with companies around what that looked like, because we expected, and by we I mean it's myself, it's our constituents who are not as well versed in legislative work and a lot of the things that were kind of coming down the pike that affected them directly. And so you've got companies like Nike, you've got companies like Ben and Jerry's and other, I would say, other companies who sometimes I think had to bite the bullet. And it's a very difficult, I think, place to be sometimes, where you don't see yourselves as being like the boogeyman around these issues. But when you're faced with these things, and I can say that there's a number of other issues that are coming down the pike where companies are going to have to start getting into some type of alignment. And I think they're very authentic conversations that need to be had too. So I think Nike does a really great job. I mean, I was actually having a good conversation with a friend yesterday around politics and media and marketing. And a lot of this is around marketing. If we think about, who it is that we're talking to, and doing all of the research and the R&D that we have to do around who our consumers are, a lot of that information that a lot of these companies have gathered, and companies have done a fantastic job at it. I'll say politics in general has not necessarily caught up to the companies yet when it comes to really understanding who the voter is, and what they actually care about, like thinking about the American consumer in that way. But our consumers are so much more than what their favorite brands are, the loyalty that they may have to the brand, because they also have real issues. I mean, we've got reproductive justice, we have climate control, we have voting rights, like all of these things, high utility bills, like all of these things really matter to our customers and to our voters too. And so I think there's real authentic conversations that have to start being had around that. And if you see that you can be in alignment with, and you may lose some customers, but if you lose them and then you gain, and you really show that you are gaining, you're taking a stand on a particular issue, then I think that's what we're starting to see a lot more companies really not be so afraid to do. And I really applaud companies who are able to do that and have a stake in the ground on a particular issue that matters to them when it comes to social issues particularly.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you nailed it also with the conversation around losing a customer, gaining many, you hear it. We're bending the arc, but on the other side of that arc is the winning team. Companies want to be on the right side of history, and that's what they're doing. That's what they're starting to do. I
Mhm.
think I just have a follow-up question. I would love to hear more around, what do you wish companies knew about this
Mm.
process? And then what do you wish organizations knew? I think we often
Ooh.
know that we see nonprofits are just a little bit behind on the tech field, and sometimes our corporations are a little bit further ahead in doing things we don't wish they were doing. And so I'm just wondering, how do we bridge that gap? What do you think what would help if each of them knew about each other?
I think that's an excellent question, and primarily because organizations and companies have a shared interest, whether or not they know it. So I
Mm,
tell our organizations all the time, you have to talk to the lobbyists. You've got to talk to the company. Even if you all don't have alignment on an issue, it's good to know where your alignment may be able to start, why you end in the place that why are you ending in this particular policy area, and how can you work these things out. And I think sometimes, and I'll be honest, I think sometimes organizations get a little bit intimidated in talking to the business
mm,
community in that way, which they shouldn't be. They are policy experts. They know their stuff. They have a connection to the community in a way that companies do not. But you often get a little bit intimidated by the end of the conversation, which is the bottom line, and it's making money. And so also companies are considered to be the boogeyman too. I mean, we talk about
mm.
our state chamber, we talk about our local chambers, but we don't actually talk about how can we meet really in the middle on the things that matter most to us. And sometimes that means that we have to do a little bit we have to lose some things, we have to compromise, and a lot of organizations, I don't think, want to do that much compromising, which is fine because we want what we want, right?
Yep.
But when we're thinking about, the future of, okay, we're not going to be able to get all of this right now, but if we can make an incremental change, at least we started somewhere. And so I
Mhm.
think if we were able to have those types of conversations with one another, I think that's a really good starting point. And I'll say particularly when it came to like the 202 conversation we were having, or the companies found themselves in a really difficult spot, I'll be honest. But also, I think they would have benefited from hearing from organizations around why these issues mattered. And sure, they were still going to come after them, right? Because we need you all to set your stake in the sand here. But I also want to know what the organizations care about, and why do these things matter? And maybe we could have, there's a lot of conversation that happens in the background. And if you think about, back in the day, let's talk about, the civil rights movement and stuff. They didn't have Twitter. They didn't have Instagram. They didn't have all of these platforms that we have now. And so it sometimes prevents us from having to have those face-to-face conversations. And Dr. King had to have face-to-face
Mhm.
conversations with the enemy. He just he just had to. And or who was considered to be the enemy, but being able to find middle ground there, I think, was really important. So I think it's really being able to have those conversations together that is a great starting point for us.
Absolutely. Many years ago, I had a really great opportunity where my local multi-championship year, Minnesota Lynx, our WNBA team, really stood in solidarity with the movement for Black Lives. And
Mhm.
I mean, we're talking about kneeling and protesting and, wearing, logo T-shirts in solidarity with victims. And they were really ahead of the curve many, many years ago doing this. And in response, a group of organizers actually bought out their next two games because we know WNBA has much less support. But the thing that was impressive about that was that those players actually went on to support some legislation. They actually went on to donate, doing basketball camps, and they actually stayed really active in the movement. And it was really impressive. It's also a bit of an anomaly. And so
Yeah,
I wanted to share that story to kind of warm us up to this next question around, sometimes it can be really hard to talk about racial justice, especially when you don't get it.
yeah.
And luckily, we had a team that did. And so, my question is, what happens when companies choose to not engage? When they say, "Oh, it's too hard," or "We're going to do it wrong"? And so, what are the faults of that? What are they losing? When they don't step up?
Yeah. I think what we see is the soul of the company at that point, right? Like
Mhm.
we really see how nervous um, they are to actually approach such a difficult topic. And I get it's not easy. It's not easy to have these internal conversations with maybe your staff of color. It's not easy to have these conversations on a more public forum. And everyone before they take that step out into the public space, they want to make sure that they have everything right. And I think what we have to realize is there is a space for grace for everyone. And when we're talking about race relations, when we're talking about social justice, because it's not necessarily a space that is occupied wholly by corporations,
Mhm.
but it's a space that corporations have multi-ethnic, multi-generational staff and employees and leadership. They have a customer base that is complex and is very diverse, and they have to be able to speak to those individuals in a way that is very authentic and recognizing that they don't have all the answers. So I think when they're very silent in that way, it does show to the customer that, okay, well, I would have liked to have heard you say something. And I also think too, like our younger generation, and I'll say maybe millennials and even folks that come after us, we expect to hear companies say a little bit of something about a major issue.
Mhm.
And because I want to be able to back you in my buying power, knowing that you are in alignment with me, that you care about these issues too. And we are very much driven by that social
Mhm.
um, connection, right? Like even though you may be at a large organization and you've got more money than who knows what, right? But I want to know that you care about this issue too, and that you're doing something, whether it's a conversation, whether you're stepping out with a unique product, or even if you're just hosting a conversation around it. It could be something that's even internal,
Mhm.
but recognizing kind of where you sit in the ecosystem, and it doesn't make sense for you to actually say something, I think really matters.
Awesome. I mean, I could not have said it better. We do have some really great questions from the audience, so I'm gonna ask those. But I have one question I wanted to make sure I did as a follow up. And to the folks in the audience, thank you so much for your questions. Please keep asking them. Please keep dropping in your commentary. I wanted to follow up with. We talked about a lot about corporations. That's the conversation of
Hmm.
today. But also, there are some pretty large nonprofits that are almost corporate size,
Yeah.
and we also know sometimes they struggle with talking about race and social justice when they may be a direct service, or they may not, they may be in maybe their only environment and they don't know how to talk about race, or vice versa. And do you have any advisement around how do you take those risks when you are actually meant to be a social good entity but are still struggling with social justice? And what advisement would you provide to institutions like that?
Yeah, I would say find your intersection there,
Mhm.
because there's an effect for every marginalized community, regardless of what the industry is or what directs practice or service provider that you are. If we're talking about tech, I mean, we can talk about the inequality of broadband access in rural areas, or particularly in low income communities. I mean, we can talk about the effects of climate control, or certain areas of a particular city may have higher cancer rates than others because of X. So I think if we can really dig in and probably do a little bit of polling around, like,
Mhm.
what is the intersection like to these issues that matters most to our communities, and how can we help support them, and give a little bit of resource to those things too. So whatever your industry is, if you're making shoes, there are communities that young people need more athletic shoes, or they may need more whatever for their teams or something like that. Like, we can figure out a way to insert ourselves into the community, and it's really truly about public private partnerships. um, I think that is a really good way to kind of insert yourself into the community in that way, and to really step up to the plate.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have a question from the audience, Phyllis Richardson, that I wanted to get to. It actually, I have a niece who will only eat Ben and Jerry's, like will not buy ice cream from other companies. We have a congressman in Minnesota who owns Talenti ice cream. And so there was a phase where I was only buying Talenti. I was very committed to certain things. And so and that was inspired by young people around me who are very conscious around how they're making decisions. But her question was, how do we engage this generation? I see Gen Z and some younger millennials that are younger than me. They're very active. They're very excited. They have nothing but passion. But how do we support them and how do we lift them up and them holding these corporations accountable? What does it look like for them to be able to help guide these corporations to make better decisions because they are, the next generation of customers. And so, what
Yeah.
is the role of young people in making sure corporations are doing the right thing?
Yeah. I think corporations, and particularly those that have high brand folks that have a high brand awareness, folks who have high buying power in some of these corporations too, um, they have to insert themselves in a way like they have through their marketing tactics where it just is seamless in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
What I've seen in particularly in the political space is that we have not inserted ourselves in everyone's everyday. We aren't talking about the issues in an everyday way. They always politics cares about us every day, but we don't care about politics until
Mm-hmm.
it's time to go to the ballot box. But particularly, I want to make sure that we can we have billboards. I think we have to do more guerrilla tactics. We have to have more unique engagement opportunities for young people. Corporations really should utilize the the street teams in different ways that young people just kind of engage with each other because it's very creative. It's driven by culture, it's driven by subculture. And that's how you have to insert yourself into the mix of what young people care about. I mean, we're talking about nails. I got ghosts on my nails for Halloween, but if I wanted to do something around voting, then I would probably vote for whoever on
Yeah.
my nails or something. But there's different ways that they can do that. And I think they have to first tap into young people, invest in young people, find the young folks who really have a knack for it. These young people, I'll tell you, I mean, I have social media, but I am not like big on social media like that. But these young people have really taken social media and they have like ran with it.
Yes.
They are curators, they're creators, they're artists, they're developers. I mean, I am so very impressed with just how much like they connect with people in a real way, and they're doing things that are like we've all lived the same life too. So like so I can see the content that they've created and I'm like, yeah, man, that is so funny. Or I definitely did that when I was this age.
Absolutely.
And so you got to be able to tap into that talent and then invest in it in a real authentic way and have them use their platform to be able to do what they with how they speak to their audience in a way that they do that's very unique. So you just got to get really creative. Folks are kind of scared sometimes to be creative, and I'm not sure why. You've got to step out on a limb sometimes. And what I enjoy most about politics is that it's all hypothesis. We
Yep.
kind of don't know what's going to happen with anything. We have trends, we know what's happened in the past, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so we have to just try new things all the time.
Absolutely. A follow-up question I had is that for us at Civic Eagle, one of our core values is to be audacious and be people first without risk. It is just a bold stance that we've taken and we stand by. Our mission is to fight for equity. We want democracy to be available to everyone who wants to participate in it. And so there's a risk in taking that stand. It's something that we're willing to do. And I think there's a belief that there's a risk in not taking one, but there's
Yeah.
no risk in staying home, I would say. But I
Yeah.
just don't think that's true. And I just wanted to hear more around, what do you think is the risk of staying home? What do you think is the negative impact that happens to corporations that choose to stay home, to stay inside, to avoid the conversation and just kind of let it go by and just say like, the movement for Black Lives is the moment. The voting rights bill will be handled on its own. And so,
Mhm.
what do you think is the actual risk to doing nothing? What's the long-term impact you think folks might be seeing?
Yeah. You risk your silence is louder
Mhm.
often, and you definitely risk your customer base, but you also risk the trust that you have developed in your customers as well. Um, staying at home and doing nothing doesn't yield you anything. And I also think it's a little bit ignorant to think that these are just moments and that they'll just pass. You've got to be able to sit in the moment that we're in now and really see there are young people marching on the streets.
That's right.
They're not going home, so they're not going to leave. Um, Legislation is being passed in a number of legislative bodies across the country. We're seeing a trend. So it's almost like read the room. You know what I mean? You got to see everything that's happening here. And so if you don't, it's telling. It certainly is. I would say with 202, and I would even say with abortion rights, I can almost guarantee you that we're going to see that here in Georgia. And a number of states that started the anti-voting rights legislation when it started in Iowa, and then it moved across the country into other legislatures. A lot of those legislatures were in Republican-led legislatures. And then we see a concerted effort that is happening on the state side. So it's not so much federal anymore. I mean, we've got our federal issues, right? But we see a lot of this happening on the state side. And so we have to be ready in our state legislatures for that, which means that your lobbyists also have to be ready too. And y'all are sharing the same halls with a lot of these organizations that are fighting against some of these issues, whether it's COVID protections for workers or whatever the case may be. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff that is coming down the pike right now. But the silence, I think, is really deafening more than anything. And I think some organizations and companies can make the decision if that's just where they want to be and what they want to do. And so recognizing that there has been silence, recognizing that we can see how much you've given to certain elected officials, where your loyalties lie. And I also think too, if you really want to back the support of organizations, give to organizations that are doing a lot of this great work. And that doesn't mean, I get it, it's politics. And some folks may not really understand that the politics, you've got to talk to the House. You've got to talk to the Speaker of the House. You have to have good relationships with folks. You have to, sometimes be able to give to some of those entities. But you also have to give to the other side too. But you should also recognize that there is a pool of individuals who work in these really, really strong organizations that could use the support, or where you can understand where your alignment is. And so I think that's really important to really hone in on what your social responsibility and your accountability is going to look like, because the accountability is not going to stop. We just saw it with Black Lives Matter. It is going to continue. We saw it with voting. It is going to continue with abortion rights. It's going to continue with redistricting. It's going to continue with employment, education, you name it. Folks are going to want to know what you have to say about it.
Absolutely. I think we are going to close out with one question. This one is fun and lighthearted for me. I would just ask, what's your favorite feature inside of NView? What's your favorite thing to do inside of the tool?
I think the feature that I enjoy the most, and this is probably in alignment with communications and media stuff, being able to have a list of all of the bills that you're watching to share with. So a lot of our groups, we host press conferences, and we do a lot of media activity or events around some of the work that we're doing at the Capitol. But it's good to be able to just point to which pieces of legislation are the most important for this particular issue. And so being able to create the link, I think, is really cool. Also being able to share the legislation with your team and highlight and take notes and all that stuff is really cool. So you guys have done an excellent job in allowing for teams to be able to collaborate seamlessly within legislation and being able to share it in a really easy to read way too.
Awesome. Thank you. And before we close out, I just wanted to ask, what's a message you want to share with the folks? We've got folks on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we're going to be sharing this with, the hundreds of our customers. And so what message do you want to leave for folks?
The only thing I think I'll say to folks, just don't be afraid to get out there, get creative, figure out some really unique ways to engage with young folks. I know in Georgia we're talking a lot about young people right now. We've got some really big elections that are coming up, and a lot of really big issues that are going to continue to come down the pike. So get creative, figure out a unique way for you to engage with your voters and your customers. I'm so used to talking about constituencies and voters, and I would also say reach out to organizations, even if they haven't reached out to you first. Have some of your lobbyists reach out to organizations to whether it's around climate or choice or whatever it is, corporate accountability work, whatever it is, have them just have conversations around what are the issues that matter most and what issues do you have with us and how can we kind of get into some alignment. You may not be able to come to a common ground, but at least you open the door for a conversation, and now you have at least a friend that you can talk to when you're at the state capitol. So I would say do that, and also on the other side for organizations to do the same.
Absolutely. Thank you. I couldn't give it better advice. I absolutely love that. I just want to again say thank you for spending time with us. I know you're super busy, and just we appreciate your brilliance. And thank you for being a user. And to the audience, we are so happy to have you here with us. If you are interested in learning more about NView, go ahead and head to our website, civiceagle.com. We have a way for you to sign up for a free trial today, or just book a demo to learn more about us. And again, Ashley, thank you for spending time with us. And to all the folks viewing from home, have a great day.
Thanks for having me, y'all. Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all.